Something quite interesting is coming up, and it says that the cost of winning a presidential election in Ghana has risen to over $200 million. That's according to Ghana Center for Democratic Development, CDD Ghana. Now, speaking at an Open Society event in Accra on September 15, 2025, the executive director of CDD Ghana, Professor Kwesi Prempeh, warned that the soaring cost of elections could exclude competent leaders who lack access to abundant resources. He explained that this development raises serious concerns about the inclusiveness and sustainability of Ghana's democratic system. He further cautioned that these trends jeopardize Ghana's pursuit of democracy and prosperity, stressing that politics risk becoming preserved for the wealthy and well-connected. Take a listen to him.
When you read the report that is being launched today, you would find some very staggering statistics, right? And it's not just a Ghana problem. Not only in Ghana are we running elections where candidates are putting up millions of dollars, tens of millions. At the presidential level, over $100 billion is what it takes. Actually, that is like 2,000 number. Currently, it's probably double or triple. We don't even know. That's the problem, right? You need about $200 million probably to win a presidential contest. How many of you here are ever going to be in that category, in that cohort of candidates, right? Even the parliamentary level, including at the primary level, it's just impossible, right? You cannot have that kind of a democracy and expect it to be developmental. So we need to worry about things like campaign finance, regulation of internal party democracy. If the parties are the building blocks of our democracy, because we call it multi-party democracy, then what happens in that party? What happens in those parties? What those parties stand for? How they behave, how they choose their leadership. But if you have rules like you have to nurture the constituency, what does that mean? You understand what it means. Before you are chosen by the party oligarchs at the constituency level, you must prove that you have nurtured the constituency. It's one of the rules in some of the parties. What does that mean? You must have fed them while you were out of power or in power with a lot of money. Where are you going to get that from?
And that's the voice of the head of CDD Ghana, who has been sharing a thought on, I'm talking about Professor Henry Kwesi Prempeh, who spoke earlier on issues regarding the funding of political parties, whether or not collectively as a people we need to start funding them. Then on the back of that, we can actually monitor what and where they dispense these finances. But what does the law say about political parties and how they are financed? We've been joined in studio by Wisdom Safo, who is with our research desk here at Media General. Wisdom, thank you for joining us. To start with, I mean, we know that we say we are a law-abiding nation, or we are a country that has laws to guide us. What exactly does the law say about political party financing?
Okay, so Martin, when it comes to political party financing, there's a Political Parties Act 2000, Act 574, which regulates the financing and the resources that these political parties should be used for political campaigns, and some regulations that they have to follow. Christabel, I want you to take us through some section 21 and 23. Then after that, I'll give a breakdown of what is actually in the CDD reports. And if you look into the CDD reports, Martin, it's actually said that over 90% of these political parties do not comply with this Political Parties Act 2000, or the law that regulates the financing. So, Christabel.
All right, so Political Parties Act 2000, Act 574, now to Section 21. It says annual accounts. Every year within 6 months after the end of the financial year, parties must file returns that show the state of the accounts. These must also include sources of funds, membership dues, contributions, and donations, whether cash or in kind, as well as party properties. These returns must be backed by a statutory declaration from the General Secretary and Treasurer and supported by an auditor's report. And on to Section 23, which says contribution to political parties. Political parties are allowed to raise funds, but only lawfully. Contributions and donations can only come from Ghanaian citizens, Ghanaians abroad, and companies or partnerships that are fully Ghanaian owned. Companies with less than 25% foreign ownership are also allowed. But importantly, if parties receive contributions that break these rules, they are not allowed to keep them. Such funds are forfeited to the state. And this will bring us to Section 24, which says foreign contributions or donations. Non-citizens are strictly prohibited from donating directly or indirectly to political parties. If a party accepts such funds, it commits an offense and can be fined up to 10 million cedis, with the donation forfeited to the state. For the non-citizen donor, the consequences are even harsher, where we have a fine of up to 10 million cedis or a 2-year prison term, or even both, and they may even be deported.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Christabel. So why is this even important? It's about leverage. You see, if you have people financing your campaigns, they have a leverage on you. If you win power, you start cutting deals. It brings some conflict of interest, and it kind of brings monocracy, if you put it that way. Our democracy is being bought because it's now being given to the highest bidder, if you may put it. So let's quickly dive into the CDD's report and the details in it. So if you look at the figures, Martin, actually the report I had was in 2021. So from my analysis, I realized that what Professor H. Kwesi Prempeh was doing, was just a reevaluation of $100 million in 2021. Its valuation currently 2025 years. So if you look at a parliamentary seat, for you to successfully campaign and potentially win a parliamentary seat, you must have around 8 million Ghana cedis. 8 million Ghana cedis. And for the presidential race, as you rightly mentioned, you have to have $200 million. If you look at the current exchange rates, you have to do the math yourself. So you have to have something very huge, almost 2 billion Ghana cedis, to actually win a presidential, or 2.4 billion Ghana cedis to win a presidential election. Now let's look at where the spending normally go. Where do these political parties spend most of these funds? So most of the funds go into direct social support, which includes school fees. They will say, okay, let me sponsor some school fees for my constituents, or for some of the deprived communities, the rents, health, and sometimes student scholarship, as I said earlier. And some also go to political parties related costs, such as the nomination forms, the election night. Conducting elections, you remember, turn on the cameras. Last election, 2024, where you said on the cameras. These are something that you have to procure. And what do you use to procure all this money? And for the financing sources, you realize that most of the financing come from elite financiers. So when Christabel was reading through the act, you realize that they mentioned people, companies, for Ghanaian abroad and all that. So these are elite people. You have to have money in order to give. And these are people actually who are elite, as we said. You have to have something to give. And when they give, they don't expect... They actually expect something in return when you also come to power. So it's a form of leverage. So this is what CDD is saying, that if you don't take care, if you keep on letting people finance our political parties without a check by the Electoral Commission, we risk turning our democracy into monocracy, and they would eventually lead to conflicts of interest when these political parties win power. Martin.
Okay, that is an assumption that based on the report from CDD, is actually a part of our daily political life now. But how disturbing is it? Let's engage the thoughts of Dr. Ali Nyaba, who is political scientist at the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. Doc, good evening, and thank you for joining us on 3FM.
Good evening.
How concerning or disturbing is the fact that we are unable to tell who is funding our political parties, who at the end of the day become our leaders. It could be, in the last decade, we've had NDC, NPP, but the question as to where they are sourcing their funding from is a mystery. Is it something we should be worried about as a people?
Thank you so much. Yes, it's a problem, but it's a normal problem with the kind of democracy we are practicing. If you look at the trajectory of those we are trying to emulate in this democracy, and we take America or the USA in particular as an example, in the 1800s up to about the early 1900s, they were having some of these issues, and it got to a height in 1904 when there was a scandal, and this led to the Tillman Act in 1907. From the beginning of that 20th century, in 1907, they have subsequently in 1925, 1975, and then most recently in 2010, tried to find ways to regulate moneycracy, or what my colleague just mentioned a while ago in the USA. So it is something that is sort of a global phenomenon, and because we have precedents, maybe we may follow what our predecessors have done and have proper regulations. Unfortunately, in Ghana, apart from the bits and pieces of regulations in the 1992 Constitution, and then the Act in 2000, and then maybe the Electoral Commission regulations that try to regulate how political parties are funded, we have not intentionally put up enough regulations to nip this canker in the bud.
Yeah, but the historicity you've given us tells us that it has been a challenge since as far as we can all remember. But we know that there probably is a concern there. What steps would you advise, for instance, although there is a law, the law being implemented by the Electoral Commission or any other state agency does not seem to be able to get to the bottom of knowing who is giving these parties money or these individuals money to campaign and lead us as a people. So what suggestions would you make as the best approach for us as a country if we really want to know where these funds are coming from?
Yes, it is difficult for me to pretend as if I have a solution for this problem hands-on. But again, there are precedents here in Africa and outside Africa where regulations have been made to put a cap on political parties spending during campaigns. But you see, the problem across board has always been about implementation. It is so difficult to implement some of the rules, even though they will be on paper like we have in Ghana by the Electoral Commission. You see, the situation in most African countries, especially our neighbors in Nigeria, where they have a cap. But at the end of the day, in practice, the political parties spend far more than it is prescribed on paper. So it is okay that we start from a point, but there is no one-off solution. We have to gradually, as a people, reorient ourselves towards what we intend to achieve in the democracy that we have subscribed to. That's why I gave the history because we are a young democracy. Sometimes it is good that you study from precedents, from other sources who have practiced similar systems. But to say that there is a one-off solution, that is going to be very difficult.
Challenge.
So the first stage is to have comprehensive rules to safeguard some of these things that we are talking about. Like I gave the instance, in 1907, when there was the Tillman Act, there were loopholes. So they looked at the challenges, revised them in 1925, revised it in 1974, and then subsequently in 1910 it was strengthened. But even that, if you check the last elections in America, particularly the 2020 elections, there were still allegations of some of this monocracy in the system. So it is difficult to say there is a one-off solution. Maybe we should look at the situation holistically, not just from the perspective of the political parties, but as a people, and we decide to take a stance on what we intend to achieve in our democracy. And then we orient ourselves strategically to reduce this trend of spending a lot of money virtually to buy power.
Doc, thank you so much for your time this evening and your thoughts that you share on this subject. Dr. Ali Nyaba is a political scientist at the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. The overarching concern really would be that you and I need to know who is funding the member of parliament that is taking decisions on your behalf, and we need to know the parties that struggle or campaign to come into power to get our mandate to lead. If you do not know, and it is probably a very wealthy individual or a wealthy group of people, then they will be calling the shots at the end. That is the concern that CDD is trying to draw our attention to. So it is a very important national conversation to have. And that is why we are happy that you're also sending in your messages on our Facebook page and on our YouTube channel. You're still listening to 3FM 92.7. This is Hot.